Hello, you lovely lot, wherever you are and whenever you are, he says. And I reminded myself of this just as I was waiting to come on live there, that we sort of take for granted. Generally, I would suggest that most people are watching the live stream, but we forget. I don't know if I certainly do anyway, that an awful lot of you could be watching it in the replay later. So, welcome to you as well. Welcome also to those who tend to listen to these things as podcasts, because we also forget that people do that. I trust and hope you are all well, folks. It is a pleasure to be back in the hot seat. Roy and family are off on a little trip, little last minute subversion, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know where that word came from. It's a real word, you know. And Roy late last week reached out and asked if I would do this, and it was an honor and a pleasure as always. It always is, because it's good to get in and talk to you guys, you folk. I know I could do my own live streams if and when I want. I know it's a long time since and this is my own live stream. It just happens to be in the sort of the usual Vpub slot on a Thursday night. It's just, as I generally say, and many times, I usually don't have the time to do it as much anymore. And here's the thing, the more important thing. When Roy reached out last week to ask me, was I available to do this? I jumped at it because I had already a topic in mind. Now, I'm going to point something out in the room if you haven't already noticed, and I'll go into the chat and speak to you in a moment, as I generally do. This guy here, this banner. So this isn't something that's superimposed on. This is a physical thing here behind me. The Whiskey Novice, independent whiskey news and reviews, etc. I have started doing Scotch whiskey independently as the Whiskey Novice, independent of working in the whiskey shop, the Irish whiskey shop. In that case, I focus on Irish whiskey. This is something as the Whiskey Novice. I've done a couple already. I've got a couple more in the books. Scotch whiskey tastings here in Ireland. And what I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to educate. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a paid educator. I've never trained as an educator, so I wouldn't suggest that for a second. What I am trying to do is change perceptions a little. The perception I have heard coming through the whiskey shop, this is what has given me the sound box to do so, is that I have heard this coming through the whiskey box, through the whiskey shop, in the last sort of 3.5 years that I've worked in there. And it's the perception that people, particularly in Ireland, I would suggest, have of Scotch whiskey. And a lot of that perception is down to cheaper blends and more predominantly peated whiskey. And it's even those blends, those cheaper blends, the bales, the grouses, that sort of thing. Some cases there's an element of peat. Some cases they're not the best blends in the world by any means. And then we're looking at the heavily peated stuff. This is a general perception that they have in Ireland of Scotch whiskey. I'm suggesting this is certainly what I've heard. So I started to do these independent tastings. A very easy question then, when we start to do these tastings, is to the host, to the people that are, having me along to do this. I'm asking, how many whiskies are we doing in the flight? If the answer is 5, perfect. If the answer is 6, perfect. Why? If the answer is 5, there are 5 regions of Scotch whiskey. If the answer is 6, it suits me. There are 6 regions of Scotch whiskey. If the answer is 4 or 7, which it rarely is, we might have an issue. But so regionality, that's what I'm pointing out. Regionality of, in particular, Scotch whiskey, but we're going to look at others as well. So it was a subject that, when asked that question about Scotch whiskey, where do I go about doing tastings on Scotch whiskey? Regionality is easy. We divide the regions up, and I talk about those regions. I have 6 whiskies sitting around me this evening, and the bulk of them, we're missing certainly one anyway. It's the classic malts series from Diageo, because around and about 20 to 25 years ago, I can't remember exactly when, I visited Scotland with friends. And I've told this story before, and I came home with the classic malts collection. And it just seemed to be something to come home with. And I'd never really sat down at that point with single malts of sort of that bit more quality. Scottish single malts, sat down and taken time over them. And that's what I did. I took my time over these and loved every one of them. So I have most of them around me here this evening in my glass, and I've decided to start with the Glenkinchie. So representing Lowlands, the Glenkinchie 12-year-old. And I've never actually sat down with these since. The only one I'm missing at the minute's the Dalwhinnie. I will actually be buying it for reviewing purposes. The Dalwhinnie 15, which was part of that classic malts collection. And the only Dalwhinnie I actually had was the Winter's Cold, which I killed off just last week, and a drop left in the ball. It didn't dawn on me at that point I hadn't intended, because, and it's one of the subjects that we're going to focus on tonight, regionality and the purpose of regionality in Scotch whisky, because Scotch whisky at the moment is the only one that's regionalised. Production, certainly where production is concerned. So that is the subject. We will dig deeper into it, but first of all, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to welcome you in, and I'm going to look into the chat and see who's in. Let's see who I know. Let's see who knows me. It's generally a case more so of who knows me more so than who I know, because I will, and I already know, because I've already looked through it, that there's names in the chat that I don't necessarily know, be they viewers of Roy Duff's Aquavitae or mine, and I just, new names to me. And it's because, once again, I don't do an awful lot of live streams. Anyway, Drew from AZ was in very early doors trying to catch a worm or something. But it's good to see you, and Drew, always a pleasure. Tim Powers, see, yet again, already a new name to me, but maybe not a very new name to this. He seems to be sort of well known in the group. So welcome to you, Tim. Pleasure to have you in. Pete Head's in, Sugar Kitty's in, Big Jimmy Jazz. I noticed that, Jim, was it always Big Jimmy Jazz? Or I always used to think it was just Jimmy Jazz. He certainly is. Jimmy, whenever he's coming, like, good to have you in, buddy. Hopefully I'll see you this year again. Kyle Taylor is in, another new name to me, but welcome. Spanner DTB is another new name to me. Cheers to you. Thomas Jones. These names are, in fact, new to me. Chris Pollock, I'm sure I know that name. Roe, or RO Tasmania, definitely a new name, but it's saying, now here we are. I like the vibe of this pub. So that's positive. TJO 19th, TJO, I do know you. I definitely do know you. Of course I do. Tobias, good to have you in, my friend. Alec is certainly a new. Oh, there's so many new names to be in here, and it's good to see you all in. I'm gonna, Stephen Thompson, my friend from Isla. I'm gonna say from Isla. I'll not read out every comment. We will scan down through some of them. I will stop into the comments tonight, definitely, and I hope to make it, because this is, in my opinion, a good topic, and one that I want your opinion. I am desperate for your opinion on regionality. Jerry Miller, how are you, sir? It is always good to see you. Thomas, sit. Neil Laverty, my friend. I will see Neil very, very soon. It's another topic of conversation. The Glasgow Whisky Festival coming very, very soon to a city near you, if you're near Glasgow. Derek McGrainer, how are you? Norman Rad. I was going to say where I know that name, but Norman Rad, is that not the Silver Surfer? Something like that. Anyway, good evening, everyone. How are you? Ben Damon Hunter, hope you're keeping well, my friend. Whiskey Mechanic, Christian Jensen, Greg's Whiskey Guide, and everyone, greetings from Paris, although 1 year later, I could have said greetings from Speyside, but it appears tonight that I'm not the chosen one. But say la vie. Gern Blocker, how are you? And eventually we'll catch up. Northern Ireland, Stumpy, how are you, my friend? Good evening. Let me see. Still scrolling. Lee J. Brown, I'm going to struggle to keep up with this tonight. I know I'm trying Mondays. Hello, how are you? Jeff Whisky, good to have you in. Jimmy Legg, there we are. I was going to say the gang's all here yet, all here now, but I'm sure there's more to come. Jimmy says that banner is fancy, very fancy. That banner was gifted to me by the organizer of the last Scotch whisky tasting I did just last week. He had this made for me, and I was delighted, absolutely delighted. So payment, it wasn't, that was payment alone. David Owen, good to have you in, David. Good to see you. Tony Nelson, hope to see you later in the year again. Andrew J. It keeps coming. Bowman, Blair, I take it. Rick Johnson, the Whiskey Zone. Like it. Let me see. And I think we're going to go on. Yes, we're getting, actually, are we getting near the end? For Nightwalker, hello. I'm going to have a dram in a moment here. I do like the nose in this. I did like the nose in this Glencairn, I think, whenever we reviewed it. Stevie. Richard Nguyen from Canada. Nice banner. Thank you, Richard. The banner may become a bit of the topic of conversation. Donner Pass Whiskey. How are you? Cheers, everyone. I'm sure we have all voted on the Oswas now that it's closed. The Oswas I didn't really mention a whole lot. Reb Mordecai, how are you? I still take part in the Oswas every year, and still, take part as a contributor, and still very honoured to be asked. It definitely has a purpose, I feel. Now, Roy O'Meara, how are you? There are going to be people that I will miss. Peter Box, they're still coming in. 107 people in the chat. That is fantastic. Thank you so much. That's probably more than I've ever had. Genuinely is. It's certainly as many as I've ever had. Craig's in, another one of the Highlands. There was a few people I noticed in the chat earlier on saying good evening to the Barflies. Good evening, of course, and to the Highlands, or in some way they're saying it. So the Highland, what is the Highland Battalion? If you're not aware, the Highland Battalion is pretty much a group of people, ourselves, and there's been 15 of us in just this chat group, but there are many more badge wearing Highlands throughout the world. I made sure of that. Benny Freese, Benny, my friend, thank you. Thanks for nursing the Barflies with Roy absent, Jim. Just in to say hi, but we'll definitely watch the replay. Cheers, everyone, and take care. Benny, thank you so much, my friend. Always good to hear from you, Benny. Benny's always straight into my chat as a patron every week. It's always very much appreciated. Graham Young, maybe see you later this year again, and the Whiskey Pal Jason's in. So there, I've made it to the bottom of the chat. Good, done. I'm going to have a sip because I feel like as if I need it. This, as I said, the Glencairn 12-year-old. And still, I think a good dram, a good solid dram, very, very fruity, very citrusy. Glencairn, Edinburgh, Lowland. Does it represent Lowland? Does it represent Lowland well? I don't know. Here, I'm going to show you the map that when asked, 5 whiskies from Scotland, this is the easy one to use. And this is the one that pretty much the Scotch Whisky Association uses. This is the one that if you look at their website, this is what they show. What are the regions? So 1909, regionality sort of came about in this form, the 5 regions. Prior to that, the North, the Lowlands and the Highlands were recognized as sort of regionalized. I've read an awful lot in the past couple of weeks in the build up to this about regionality and the regions of Scotch whisky. Like a lot of these things, taxes were involved. They do tend to pop up the taxation, doesn't it? Just going to answer a question here quickly. Andrew J, Whiskey Novice Jim, what is access to Scotch whisky like in Ireland? Do you get most official bottlings that are available in the UK, and what indie bottlings are readily available. We have a couple of really good places, Andrew. Fairley's in certainly where Northern Ireland's concerned, Fairley's in Coleraine would be one of the only people that gets anything from Springbank, and they will get that sort of stuff. And you know, we're all always very focused whenever it comes out. There are generally and genuinely, I would say, a handful of good places in the island of Ireland for getting Scotch whisky, good Scotch whisky. But let's face it, most of it's online now anyway. I would suggest that nearly everybody here is buying online in Ireland. Yes, there will be some local buying, but it still tends to be easier online. Reb Mordecai says, I would split Highlands up into mainland and islands, very different region styles. And Reb, will just hit on that straight away, because when asked for 6, this is what I've done with that map. I've added the islands separate. Now, this was actually the map that I used last week. I thought I'd actually saved one without the dots on it, because this was the 6 whiskies that I had given them. There was a Benriach and Edredor, Port Charlotte, etc., etc. And I mean, it doesn't, you know, really focus into what the reason those little dots are highlighted. That was just what I was doing last week, so don't be really highlighting on that. Aquavita is in saying, hello novices, getting for the Highlands. Greetings from the Highlands. Thank you, Whiskey Novice Jim, for looking after the folk on a Thursday. Listen, Roy, thank you for asking. Very much appreciate it. So this is as I said, is the map that I use. And Sugar Kitty's saying officially that the islands doesn't exist. Well, obviously they do exist, but it doesn't exist as a region of Scotch whisky. But I would agree with Reb Mordecai. I tend to think that it's easier. And I mean, I'm not alone in thinking it. When you think about the classic malts collection, Diageo had already separated the islands out, in that there were 2 in there. It's a matter of fact, there were technically 2 Highlands in that classic malts collection, the Oban and the Dalwhinnie, which I don't have. And they also then separated out Tasker, so they were splitting in that. I don't know what I mean. At the end of the day, what Diageo were doing with this regionality, it's just one producer. It's not necessarily, you know, anybody. They weren't making regionality, Diageo, by releasing these. I've just seen a couple of people coming in. I just want to say hello. Mark Watt. Mark, cheers to you, my friend. Mark looked after us very well in Campbelltown earlier this year. I look forward to seeing you, hopefully, in Glasgow in November. And if not, then maybe I would like to think the Independence in March next year. Classic Malts started as the Classic 7, and Blair Athol was included. Funny, I actually had in my head that I had other bottles out earlier on. I had the Clynelish out, and had it in my head, firmly in my head, that Clynelish 12-year-old was part of that Classic Malts collection, which of course it wasn't. Roy Duff has given me a very, very, very strong addition to the bottle fund, as I like to call it. Bar still booked for the evening. Looking forward to having you in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, and I'm very, very much looking forward to a Glasgow Whisky Festival. Who else popped in that I want? Ryan Sutherland. Good to see you, and Ryan. I hope everything is going well up there in 8 Doors. Haven't been speaking to you in a while. It's just I hope you're going well. So yeah, the regionality, and technically Diageo splitting regionality, they're splitting these bottles up into what they were considering regionality, but I mean, there was nothing necessarily official about it. Cheers, Roy. Thanks for that addition to the bottle fund. But it was pretty much this map. This was 1988, I believe, the original, the Classic Malts collection from Diageo. But we already, since 1909, had pretty much then got used to this map that we're looking at here, the 5 regions. And even at that, it's funny, you look at different maps, and Speyside takes slightly different shape. It's, you know, it's one of those things that I wouldn't suggest it's a firm grip on things, although you need to be careful with that, because when we look at the likes of Glengoyne, technically a Highland distillery, but lowland matured whiskey, lowland, so it's a bit messy there. So we need to be very careful then about what we call the regions. What are considered these regions, where lines on a map are drawn. That's regionality then. 2009, this was officiated by the Scotch Whisky Association. So that date, 2009, is something that I think we have to keep very firm in our minds, it was officiated. The question sort of now is, what difference do regions make in modern terms? Why am I sort of making a point out of this now? Well, the reason I'm making a point out of it is that I think since 2009, I could be wrong, but I think we've got that bit more, I'm going to use the term nerdy about whiskey and whiskey production and what we consider and what we want from our whiskey. And regionality, as we've seen, has just become inactive to a certain extent. I don't know whether that's the right word I want to use. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read something out to you. And the reason I'm going to put this on the screen and I'm going to read it out. And the reason I'm going to read it out is, as I mentioned at the start, I'm very aware that some people actually listen to these things while driving, etc. And they treat sort of live streams, videos, etc. as podcasts. Perfectly fine. I mean, just drive safely. But so I sort of thought to myself, well, there's something I want to read out here. I'll put it on the screen, but we'll read it at the same time. So, in a Scotch context, there was such a thing as regions once upon a time. The more remote you went, the more they would have relied on peat for fuel, etc. If you were central or had a railway to facilitate your needs, you could be more flexible and pander to market desires. Whatever was popular in general, regionality was the preserve of the industry. It was a language used by and characteristics that were relied upon by blenders. Up until the 1980s, this was 98% of whiskey sales. And we know this. We know this. It was blended whiskey was what we knew. So it made more sense. It certainly made sense about regionality at that point. In 1988, when Diageo, there you go, there's that date, DCL, UDV at the time, released the classic malts, the regions became a concept that the public could understand. Malty, honeyed, Dalwhinnie, for example, well, it was Dalwhinnie at the point, and lightly peated Oban, Highlanders, which became more rugged and more remote. The Highlands, for example, Talisker, heavily peated from Islay, Laga 16, sweetly spiced Speysiders, Cragganmore, and grassy floral lowlanders, Glenkinchie. Campbelltown was a thing in itself, but Diageo didn't own one of those, so Campbelltown became immediately synonymous with Springbank, and so it was for 20 plus years. Regionality was taught and the idea solidified. Now, there's a couple of points there. This isn't all of this, but there's a couple of points that I want to bring out on this. First, as I said earlier on, there were two Highlanders in that original series. And I think that's the idea. You're looking at Dalwhinnie and Oban as those two Highlanders, two very, very different whiskies. And it was straight away, even then, it's something that throws regionality into sort of a weird mix, in that here's two different Highland whiskies. What does it matter, or what does it mean if they both taste different, but they're both Highland? Anyway, moving on. But in an era where barley was imported from everywhere and peated malt could be shipped anywhere, things became blurred. It was a marketing story rather than a reality, a way to understand character and history rather than taste it or prove it. There were always exceptions. Flat bottom paddle steamers could bring malted barley of any specification to Islay and take away the spirits too, hence Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain and their fashionably peat-free spirit and Pierside locations. Companies who didn't have an Islay distillery built mainland sites to provide peated malt, hence Ardmore, Roodmore from Glentoran, etc. This has been exacerbated recently by the explosion of new distilleries and also the investment in single malt brand building by legacy distilleries to Matt and Cabogan. Now, I'm going to interject here at this point because I was going to talk about these distilleries tonight. These were ones, and they probably will come up, but these were the balls that I was going to bring in. That the argument for and against sort of regionality was we've got the likes of Cabogan, we've got Old Barrington, we've got Michael Tour. Things that fly very firmly in the face of specifically Speyside when you look at the likes of Michael Tour and Hummersmore. Basically, each distillery making any style they like to cater for all tastes under the same company. The granulization, as opposed to the centralization required by blenders, has made a mockery of the region. So going back to what I said a moment ago, then, yeah, it's sort of, it's already come up with how regions don't necessarily work. Rev Mordecai saying regions existed a lot earlier than this. London split up Scotland into different tax regions. That's what I was saying earlier on. Taxation. It's generally in Scotch whisky, if you have an argument against anything or a question as to why, if there's ever a why, in a lot of cases the answer will be tax. It seems to want to play into everything that whiskey. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's money to be made out of it. Why not? But I think they still have a place. Not only do they make it easier for newly whiskey curious people to understand the crazy variety of brands and distilleries by breaking them down into regional buckets first, I think we also come to understand classic samples of each style and use them as anchors to help describe characters and styles of flavor profile. Ultimately, regions as a concept for flavor is broken, but geographically is permanent. Daft Mill is built to be absolutely a classic lowlander. It achieves that and doesn't waver, but that's rare these days. Ardbeg, Lefroy and Laga are classic Islay. Highland Park is a brilliant example of a remote Highlander, Talisker too. But should any of these places want to experiment and play with other styles, which they often do, it's simply a case of buying in different raw ingredients and modifying the process. All told, I still love the idea of regions today, and it's just less of a rule than it's ever been. I don't want to lay my cards out right away and say, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's being said here, but let's just finish it off and say, in an Irish or English or whatever context, well, that's over to you. I really like the way your beard captures the light. Love and kisses, Roy. Now, there you go. I might have added the last bit myself, but Roy, fair play to him. He may be off for a week, but he did want to have a say on them, and I very, very much appreciate the fact that he sent me that, because it meant something then to hear his, and an awful lot of what he said mirrored sort of what I thought and what I imagine an awful lot of us think. Highland Hamish is in. Good to see you. And it's one of those things that the argument is there for regionality. I'm not saying there's an argument against regionality. My take on it instantly is that I'm a creature of habit. It's what I've known as a whiskey enthusiast for a relatively short period of time. Let's face it, unless there's anybody in here that's 116 years old, that regionality that was introduced in 1909 was all we've known. It's all we have known is that whiskey regionality. It may change a little. It does flex a little in that. I'm sure, as I said, we went from 5 regions to 6 regions there in just a very short space of time. Let's come straight out and say it. We're only 30 minutes in, but will regionality disappear? I very much doubt it. Why would it disappear? Why would it disappear? It's what we know. We will get back to the topic in a minute. Let's go into the chat and see what's being said. I've been trying to sort of keep up with it as it's being said, but I'm sure I've missed an awful lot. So we'll scroll up. I'm trying to be well behaved. I thought that was a much smaller dram than it was. But I think I know that whenever you're talking, you sort of tend to not realize how much is in the glass. Let's go. Let's get into this chat and see what we've been saying. I want to find as much as I can about the actual subject of regionality. And well, let me see for now. DL also speak about 6 regions with the remarkable regional. Yeah, Douglas Lang with the funny. They were another one when I was thinking about it. The remarkable regional malts collection, but at the same time releases some Island Old particular, with the Highland region, and they were a good example. And actually, the Island won the Old Rock Oyster cask strength. What is it now? It's not Rock Oyster anymore. Is it Rock Oyster now? It used to be something else. Rock Island. Two balls behind me. The Old Rock Oyster cask strength. At the time I tried it, and I'm going back a few years now, I remember thinking it was one of the best whiskies I'd ever had. And that was them marrying up. This was Douglas Lang marrying up Island whiskies. And here's something, just a little tidbit thrown in there that doesn't really matter about the subject we're talking about, but how do you make Jura good? Well, you add it into one of them, and that's an awful thing to say, I suppose. But I mean, I'm still to have a Jura that I really enjoyed. But when married up at that point, it worked very, very well. It worked very well indeed. I'm sure there'll be something in here. I mean, it's not as if I'm not trying to find the highlight, but it's the typical chat, and the chat that we all love is people talking amongst themselves. Gav Strams was in. Good to have you in. Pete Head saying he's not driving tonight. That's a Monday evening thing for me, Thursday. This is why I think it works better for Frank whenever this, and I think this was another reason why Monday nights didn't work as well for me, for a lot of people, because driving, etc., etc. Let me see. Sugar Kitty, modern sciences teaches us how to control the process and what flavors come from where. So now many distilleries can make many of the styles of whiskies today. In my opinion, it's more style, and I would agree. I still like a bit of the idea of regionality. How about Springbank bottled as a lowlander someday? I think Greg said I can actually see Campbelltown going the other direction. So many new distilleries popping up that Campbelltown's just going to where obviously it'll never be a Speyside. Speyside is the most populated. That's the word I knew I'd get there eventually. Most highly populated region in Scotch whisky. Campbelltown is just growing and growing again. Will it ever be the one that it was 100 years ago? I doubt it. I wouldn't imagine there being 30 plus. But I can't see. I certainly couldn't see Campbelltown wanting to be called a lowlander and just filtered in there among them. There's definitely got to be chatting here about the subject. Roy likes the way Beard catches the rams. It is true. Or certainly does. Red Mordecai, and I may have read this, but no, I didn't. I think that the Southern Highlands share a common flavour profile, more or less. Deanston, Fetter, Cairn, Glencadam, Tullabarden. I would agree. I would totally agree. But yet again, are we regionalising the Highlands alone? Because there are distilleries out there, and I've seen it. We see it quite regularly, where they're actually Western Highlands, they're Eastern Highlands, they're, and it's at that point you sort of go, well, where does this end? where does it end? I've had another very generous addition to the ball fund from Stevie for the ball fund, Jim. Hope I'm on your team again on Sunday, Las Vegas blind tasting. Stevie, cheers, my friend. Here's hoping. I'll be there. I will be there. Jason Bradford has also given me a very generous addition. Jason, cheers, my friend. Very much appreciate it. That gets rid of that, then, can she? Very nice. It is actually very nice. I'm going to pour myself. I'll clean that glass out. This is water. I'm going to pour myself something I haven't had for a lifetime. I say a lifetime. It's in the back of my cabinet. The Oban 14-year-old. Tucked away in there. That was a noisy one. Just a little drop in the bottom of the glass. And I just noticed somebody was Roy again. Oh, Irish by province. Interesting. Now, I will get back into the chat in a moment. First of all, I want to talk about Irish whiskey by province. Now, it's not a thing. However, I did drop something. There's something in the video description for this, and it came from was it the Spirits Journal? And this was what sort of led me to believe that this subject, regionality of whiskey, was fated. It was what I was made to talk about, or what I was meant to talk about. And the reason I say that is Roy asked me, whatever day it was, Wednesday, Thursday last week, if I wanted to step in to do this evening. I think it was either that day or that evening or the next morning or something that we had text back and forward. And there's a gentleman from Cork, and I know some of you know him because I see your names in chat with him, Bill Linane. And Bill is one of those, I absolutely love Bill. He seems to pretty much just share everything to Twitter. X seems to be his platform. I've followed him for a long time, but he's certainly where whiskey, spirit, alcohol in general, he just has his finger on the pulse. And fair play to him. He shares everything, and he shares it in a very good way, and good banter, good fun. So Bill the next morning had posted this thing and this is where I felt fated to talk about this. From, I think it was the Spirits Journal. As I say, it's in the, I've put the link in the for this, the video description, and they were talking about regionality of Irish whiskey. Should it be a thing? Would it be a good idea to have regionality in Irish whiskey? And at that point, then, I thought I thought this was a good subject. It's sort of regionality being mentioned at all, just to me, as I say, meant it felt fated to be talking about regionality the next week, tonight. There were a couple of comments on this, on what Bill had posted. And Bill didn't say anything, I think, himself really in this. All he did was forward on this post from the whatever it said, the Whiskey Journal, or whatever it was, Spirits, whatever. And one of the first ones came from James Docherty. Now, James Docherty, the owner of Ardra Distillery in Donegal, here in Ireland. Ardra, the same people behind the Silky whiskey, so heavily peated blends generally, heavily peated malt, and the Ardra Distillery, the Ardra malt is their own malt, so and a heavily peated one it is. So James says, certainly a nuanced argument, and we have used regionality as a way to talk about peated Irish. Anything that helps consumers, trade, and other interested parties to navigate the category is a good thing. Organically, it may come with time as each distillery DNA becomes clearer. Now, I say no, personally. My personal impression, I would suggest here that James is saying that it wouldn't be a bad thing in Ireland. I know James, I don't know him terribly well, but I do know him, and a lovely guy, an absolute gentleman. Now, what has happened in the past, and I have heard chat about it, of the 4 provinces in Ireland. So you could maybe look at provincial divisions. You're looking at Ulster, Leinster, Munster, and Connacht, starting at the top and working your way around. Ulster there's already, I've heard chat about Ulster being the peated capital of Ireland, of Irish whiskey. I tend to look at whiskey in general as it's a bit like the Six Nations. It's more like the sort of Six Nations, in that the home countries, Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, there's whiskey. I mean, let's face it, we've all got whiskey on the map. The regionality in Scotch whiskey has been around for so long that we're just used to it, and it has a part, it has a play. Let's face it, Scotch whiskey is an industry. Scotland's economy depends on the production of Scotch whiskey. The UK's economy, to an extent, depends on the production of Scotch whiskey. It's become a bit of a mantra. I've said it so many times. In Ireland, at the moment, still technically, I wouldn't go as far as using the term only playing at it, but certainly the economy doesn't yet depend on its production. I personally see, so one of the reasons why this thing about peated whiskey in Ulster is, so Ulster doesn't just, I'm sure these are all educated people, you probably already know this, but Ulster as a province also takes in Donegal, Monaghan, and somebody else is going to remind me of the other one, but there's another one there that sort of scoops into what we know as the Republic of Ireland, but it's you know, it's part of the province of Ulster. Inishowen, which was Donegal, is the one that's sort of known. Inishowen was always peated, heavily peated whiskey, so it's known for this peated element, and that's where they're talking about. I just don't know how Irish whiskey would be developed in that way, and what would annoy me, let's face it, lines on a map in Ireland have caused nothing but fights over the years. So dividing whiskey up, I think, is a bad idea in Ireland. That's just my take on it. And I'm gonna, I think, to a certain extent, be backed up by Laurie O'Dwyer. And I'm sure there's a few of you know Laurie O'Dwyer. Laurie's one of the contributors for the Oswis. Scottish regions were a marketing construct, not organic. Does Irish whiskey really want to trundle down that path? Please let's not. And this was added in to that comment on Bill's thing. Sugar Kitty, Cavan, that was the other one I was trying to remember the name of. Thank you, Sugar Kitty. I should have known that. So that would suggest very much that Laurie, not a fan of the idea either. Laurie, Irish whiskey podcaster, the guy behind Cork Whiskey Festival, Kerry Drinks Festival, that sort of thing. Knows his whiskey. Doesn't mean he's right about everything, but I mean, I sort of would agree to a certain extent with Laurie. But we still use terms, and I know for a fact that Laurie and I still use terms about, I mean, I spoke to him recently about something, and he said about Campbelltown, easily my favourite region of Scotch whiskey. So we recognise that no matter what we say, we recognise these regions. Although I do agree with Laurie that I don't think it's a good idea. I also had a private message earlier on from a fellow Highland who we will see in the coming weeks, all the way from Arizona, Tom Wallinger. Based on where I sit, this concept lacks an absolute attribution of style for whiskies currently produced within the geographical boundaries. While we understand the basic characteristics that Scotch whisky regions historically possessed, these core attributes aren't as relevant as they used to be for the average buyer. Regions can be a good historical reference, but there are so many exceptions these days, they have little practical value other than looking at production numbers. So there you go. That's Tom's thoughts on it. And yet again, I would have to agree with him that it just doesn't, I think we're all pretty much saying the same thing. It just doesn't have the same grip that it used to have. Now, Mark Watts in the chat. Mark, funny, I'm literally looking out the corner of my eye at Mark's, loving the chat tonight, interested to see people's thoughts. My idea is that regions are old hat, to be honest. And I would agree with you, Mark, but to a certain extent. Now, this is independent bottling on Mark's behalf, using style and flavor profile to divide up the what is individual independent bottlings are divided up into the colors, etc., etc. And pretty much in the same way as SMWS have done it for a long time, and other people are sort of down that same line. Is that not what typically regionality was trying to divide them up into? Now, here's another couple of takes that I have on it. My issue is remembering what I'm going to tell you. I suppose we're all certainly of an age that becomes hard for all of us. But one of my first things, and this is me going back quite a few years. Speyside was the good example of it. I used to talk, and I still talk in my reviews about we'll get back to the Ireland thing in a minute whenever I get back into the chat. I used to talk about typical Speyside. I still talk about typical Speyside. What is a typical Speyside? Well, when I'm thinking of a typical Speyside nowadays, I've got the Cragganmore 12-year-old sitting right in front of me here. It's that honeysuckle. I tend to use the term honeysuckle an awful lot. Floral sort of note is what we would consider. I would certainly consider. I spent a long time in my earlier reviewing days with Aberlours and Glenfarclas and etc., and even Glenallachie, etc., heavily sherried. Almost every whiskey that they had on the shelf had sherry maturation or sherry finishing, or certainly sherry played a big part in there. Aberlour, Glenfarclas, the two, Macallan, or three great examples there. Very well known, very well established Speyside distilleries. To the new guy on the map, which I was pretty much at the time, I wasn't sure what a typical Speyside was. That took time, but it proved to me that this was, even going back a few years ago, how confusing regionality could be. Campbeltown, this was the other thing I was going to throw out there. We've already talked about it. If a regionality is a thing, if we and Roy's writing earlier on, which was very true, we basically got to know Campbeltown for this. The Campbeltown funk is a term that we tend to use an awful lot, and Springbank are the people that we know for that Campbeltown funk. Although I know, and I've heard it said in the past, that to a certain extent, Glen-Scotia, I mean, we talk about Springbank, we mean Glengyle as well. I would imagine most of us will talk about Springbank and sister distillery in one term. Glen-Scotia, I mean, I've heard it said in the past, and I believe it myself to an extent, that there's a hint of that funkiness going on there as well. Is that by accident? Is that by by design? It's one of those things that are we convincing ourselves that it's there, and it's not necessarily. But I could name at least 3 distilleries in the process: Dalriada, Witchburn, Machrihanish, coming up in Campbeltown. Watch this space as such. What will their style be? Are they going to try to almost replicate what Springbank are doing, so as they're known, so as they have this name of being a Campbeltown distillery? That is their thing. This is what Campbeltown makes. And it was always a very hard thing to define in Campbeltown. Once again, it was easier. Pretty much, Roy said it in his writing, defining it as Springbank was pretty much Campbeltown, because once again, in our time, it's all we know. We're too young, all of us. I'm not going to point fingers at anybody. We're too young to remember a Campbeltown with all of those distilleries in operation. So to me, it's the best example. Speyside is already, I would suggest, overpopulated. We don't see too many new distilleries popping up in Speyside. Lowlands are a very good example of, somebody will tell me a reason why so many new distilleries are popping up in the Kingdom of Fife. I'm sure somebody will tell me why. What is lowland whiskey? We were raised once again on Glenkinchie, Auchentoshan, and to an extent, the other one, the furthest south. Why is that name escaping me? It'll come to me. Square Bottle, well, Bladnoch, that's the one I was trying to think of. That's pretty much the three lowland distilleries that we were raised on, that we knew. All of a sudden, all these lowland distilleries are popping up left, right, and centre. Daft Mill were mentioned. Lindores Abbey would be an example for one, and I did say it, that if we were discussing, certainly Bladnoch, I know, are known for that yeasty, cheesy even note, and I found that once again in Lindores Abbey. If I was to try those two side by side, and somebody was to tell me that that's what lowland whiskey was, I would be convinced that that's what lowland whiskey was. But to read back traditionally, lowland whiskey, I mean, when you read the history of lowland whiskey, they tend to say about triple distilled, lighter area flavor. Well, that's Auchentoshan, in my opinion. That's, and certainly it's the one that when I hear people saying it, and believe me, you've no idea how many times a day I have to listen to this. Oh, triple distilled's much smoother than double distilled. My answer is, well, you've never tried Auchentoshan then. Right, let's get into the chat again. Let's go, because I'm sure I missed an awful lot. So I'll scroll right back up to wherever, there we go. That was Jason's very kind offer. So I will start there and scroll back down. Per square mile, Campbelltown has the most distilleries per reason. Fair enough, Mark. If you want to put it like that, that is very true. Let me see, Mark. Well, no risk of losing that either, although we learned that. Yep, leaving all. Inverary Whiskey Shop. Hello. Let me see. There was definitely chat, I know, because I could see it popping up in the corner of my eye. And let me see. I can't read, and I can multitask to an extent, but reading and reading out. Roy O'Meara, that's missing the blether for the last few weeks from Inverary. We do, I mean, I like a good blether as well. You may have noticed. I'll let somebody else explain what the word blether means. Although you probably know. You probably know. Craig Blair, Irish regionality exists on my whiskey shelves, but it's geographic rather than taste. We now have enough distilleries in Ireland to make it a thing. Bit pointless when there were only 3. We have, Craig, but I still don't think we should. There's not, I mean, pot still whiskey. You know this, but I mean, pot still whiskey is made all over Ireland. Malt whiskey is made all over Ireland. Grain whiskey's technically a novelty. I would suggest, and blended whiskey has been around forever. I still don't feel there's a necessity for, I think peated whiskey in Ireland is always going to be divisive. Say always, I mean, certainly will remain divisive for a long time. I hear more people struggling with peated whiskey than they do with anything else. Does that mean that Ulster, or even go back to Inishowen being that heavily peated whiskey and then let everybody else do their thing? Because let's face it, Irish whiskey is known for being that bit sweeter. It's known for being, and I'm convinced that an awful lot of that is because of the American market and its want for Irish whiskey, that classic Irish whiskey. It's certainly what we hear in the whiskey shop anyway. Norman Rad, speaking of Irish whiskey, does anyone know what is going on with Waterford? Are they still in receivership? Currently they are, but we do hear rumours that they're being picked up. The stock is certainly being picked up. There's an awful lot of that stock. And you can bet your boots that there's independent bottlers, wherever they may be, they'll be getting their hands on it. Sure, Kay says that's Sleeve League. It is Sleeve League. Sleeve League tend to be trading under the Ardara name now, because Sleeve League was where they wanted to build the distillery, but they couldn't get the permission to build it there. So they pretty much, it's funny that I've seen James, I think, on 3 occasions wearing 3 different T-shirts. One said Silky, one said Sleeve League, and the other one said Ardara, but I think they are calling it Ardara Distillery. I think. My Irish ancestors were given a choice to hell or Connacht. I like that, sure, Kelly. I like it a lot. Oddity. Distilleries around Ireland are not aligned by region. I know that. For example, at least 6 distilleries in County Down, but all one are different. I don't think it would work. I don't think it would work either. I really don't. And you know, you're right. 6 distilleries in County Down alone. And you know, the thing about it is, Irish whiskey is so disparate at the moment that in most cases, they don't get along. It's not that they don't get along. They'll all be in the same place at the same time. But you talk about a lot of them, you know, could we have that barrel and then that empty cask and we'll give you this, and then they'll generally stay away from each other. Certainly the feel I get whenever they come into the whiskey shop. Sugar Kitty also, yes, that was Calvin. Let me see. The original divide between the Lowlands and the Highlands region was a political tax divide. This was Emperor. Once again, Islay was very different to anything else, so naturally took its own regionality. Less important nowadays, though. Agreed. Were there no regions in the early days before every second Irish distillery closed? Henrik Schmidt. No. There was never. Well, to say there was never. Here's what I'm going to tell you. My personal take on it, my personal opinion. Irish whiskey created a north-south divide long before politics did. And a lot of that was down to basically things like the adoption of the column still. You'll hear we were raised based or believing or being told that Irish whiskey, Irish distillers would not adopt continuous still column stills. That was the south of Ireland. That was the big 4 in Dublin that were leading that sort of chat. In the north of Ireland, the 4 distilleries, certainly 3 of the 4 distilleries in Belfast alone, all adopted. 2 of those distilleries, Avonale and Conswater, were grain distilleries. That's all they produced. That's all they had was column stills. And Royal Irish, the other Dundals, had column stills in operation. Most of what was going to Scotland, I will add in later days. So I've said it in the past that I feel that whiskey in itself divided the north and south of Ireland to an extent. Rick Johnson, I don't see what the problem is with using marketing techniques to help new consumers identify with whiskey brands. At the end of the day, distilleries need to make profit. Agreed. I can agree. I'll also agree with that. With those that buy into the whole terroir concept, also be those that argue regionality is still relevant. I doubt that, Drew. I doubt that. I think the whole terroir thing was literally, I'm convinced, Mark Rainier. But it's proved it didn't work. We'll see what comes of that in the future. And just while we're talking, let me see about Drew. Drew, like the idea of contributing to the Glasgow Whisky Trip Fund. Drew, thank you, my friend. Although you contribute an awful lot. Thank you. Emperor, we have to remember that people in this chat is a very small percent of whiskey drinkers, and all it may seem tired, dated to us, it's vital to the novice. Do you know, that's 100% right. Yet again, it's something that I say quite regularly. We have to remind ourselves that whiskey producers generally are not making whiskey for us. They're making them for the larger market. And it's that simple. I've decided to throw, and we had to throw Campbelltown into the mix because it wasn't in there originally. It had to be a Springbank, but I would have suggested that this is an argument in itself as to how regionality is just a bit weird, even in Campbelltown alone. In that Springbank distillery, one distillery making three very, very distinct styles of whiskey, all under one roof, which also, to a certain extent, in my opinion, flies in the face of regionality. And I do totally agree with Inverary Whisky Shop there that, I mean, an awful lot of this we have to keep bringing up, we have to keep bringing back that, you know, we are a very small percentage of the whiskey drinkers in the world. Adrian Sloncheva, Donegal Peak definitely has a unique signature to me. Have the New Ardra single malt, and I'm struggling with it, to be honest. Same with the barley releases I've tried. Adrian, I ain't going to say anything about the Ardra. I ain't. And there's a very good reason why I'm not. And there's those in the chat who know the reason why I'm not going to say anything about it. I'll save that for another time. They're a handy tool for newbies, novices to use as a guide, and handy for. And I'm going back and Inverary here. And what I'm going to say is that the regions are handy, but what I said earlier on about Speyside is a good example of how the regions can also be a little confusing, in that Speyside alone, you know, what I would now consider a classic Speyside was sort of confusing to me at the time, that when you looked, as I said, at a lot of these heavily sherried whiskies, and I know there are peated whiskies, etc., from Speyside now, but we don't. I mean, that is modern, in my opinion, very much the modern take on it. That everywhere can make this style of whiskey. Anybody can make that style of whiskey. We haven't even got on to Islay yet, and what's going on there. Mark Watt says, agree either way. You there? I always agree with you. I suppose it's like school. The more you learn about something, the more you learn you know nothing. And the other thing, that's why I'm quite happy to call myself a novice, Mark. I've always have been. And the other thing about it is that, to a certain extent, where whiskey's concerned, and I learned this in Irish whiskey, that the more you scrape back and the more you learn the truth, the less you can forget about the truth. And it's very difficult to go back and go, do you remember whenever I knew nothing about whiskey, and it was just so much nicer to sit there and drink it and not overthink what was going on behind it. But that's probably a subject for another time as well. Craig Blair, I'm surprised Connacht distilleries haven't jumped all over Pete. Half of Mayo and Galway is blanket bog, and you can smell the turf burning. The thing to remember, Craig, is that technically in Ireland now we're not allowed to use peat for industrial use. Now, the laws behind it, I'm a bit squeaky on. I don't know, because I keep hearing different versions of it. It's certainly not allowed to be used for farming purposes at the moment. You're not allowed to mix it in as an additive. This is peat in Ireland. Is it allowed? I mean, once again, Connacht distillery, none of the maltings in Ireland are set up to peat dry malt. So even if we want to peat dry our own malt in Ireland, that malt has to make its way to. And what they're doing is, in Ardra we're doing it, they're sending their barley and the peat dug in Donegal to Islay to have it malted and then sent back. Surely that is not cost effective, in my opinion. Surely not. Surely it'd probably just be cheaper to buy in the malt from somebody. And well, there's an argument to come another time about that and why it would, you know. Whiskey Novice today, I remember to always make a point. Everyone will think I've been replaced by A. This could be a great podcast discussion topic, though. Greg was in the Water of Life film. Good to see you, Greg. Howdy, my friend. That's a long time since I've had Hazelburn 10. This is just awesome. Oh, so much rich fruit going on in there. Yes, in answer to Craig Blair, I think it's starting a little with Mickle, but not too many using peat much yet. And as I said, the likes of Brendan at Cologne will peat dry his own malt, but it's so small scale. It's a tin shed out the back of the distillery. You know, he is so small scale that he can do this, but yet is Terroir a Highland? Yes, Sugar Kitty. Even though it's more Speyside than Glenfiddich, Blacken is made there, yes. And where does that fit? Well, yet again, you know, Terroir, Highland Distillery, and Blacken, they're peated malt. I suppose they're no different from Cabocan to Matin, you know, for example. And if you wanted to go into the islands, or Lechic, Tobermory, you know, where it's just give it a different name. Roy's just barely too young to have been there. Jimmy Lake says regionality could be useful for those with several whiskey cabinets. Or yeah, it definitely has its purposes, Frank. It's one of those things that we use it for our benefit. I said it earlier on with the maps, with what this guy is doing. You know, trying to talk about Scotch whiskey to Irish whiskey lovers, to try and move Scotch whiskey into a newer world. Royce saying on Rosebank, I'm sure that's to do with something I said earlier, but I can't remember what it was. And Greg's Whiskies guys saying, don't forget some closed grain distilleries. Some were awesome in that Lowlands region. Most of them are still there, Greg. Causeway Coast, or Causeway Whiskey, Phil is in. Good evening, Phil. Howdy, or whatever you Americans say. William Callan. Greetings to the Water of Life film from Ray from the Friend at Hand, Belfast. Also, Jim, you're doing a great job. It's my wife, Ray. Hello, my friend. Thanks for coming in. I call them my work wife. Let's just say that. With all the new distilleries being built in China, will we have new regions in China also? Try breaking China down to 5 regions. Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. Very good point. Dollar Pass, Tim, I think I missed you earlier on. My local Total Wine has old stock of Vpub Castle 14 single malt Irish whiskey for $55 US. That's great stuff. Sherry and bourbon cask full maturation. Tim, it's Bushmills. Yeah. It was originally the very, very early in the Pub, the stuff that was found technically in the castle, it was the story that they told. Was the B Daly distillery, I believe. That was the stuff which is now Tullamore Dew, pot still at the time. But the Pub Castle has been Bushmills spirit for many, many, many years. And good stuff it is. Whiskey Games. Matt, how are you, sir? I was checking the Scotch Whisky regulations, Scotch Whisky Association. It says that as the whole Speyside region is surrounded by the Highland region, any Speyside whiskey can legally be called Highland whiskey. Yeah, also true. And it makes it a bit confusing, and and even going one further, who is it that's right on the an Oct? Is it Oct? That's right on this sort of line between Highlands and Speyside, and they can be technically, I think, called either. But as you say, Matthew, you're right. I mean, anything Speyside, because it's set firmly in the heart of the Highland region. It's pretty much anything. So once again, it just to a certain extent confuses the whole bloody thing. Rick Johnson's asking, Mark, do you know what the number of whiskey distilleries in China is currently? It's I know certainly that it's growing, and I know that they've a huge interest in Irish whiskey, which is good news for us. Ireland's tribal enough. We don't need to cause more. Exactly, Phil. Exactly. That's my views on it entirely. It skipped down on me there, and there was something else I'd seen that I wanted to read. I think it's a great point you made about the new Campbelltown distilleries. Interesting to see how it plays out. Thank you, Ginger Genius. It'll be interesting to see where that one goes. I had genuinely forgotten how good this was. Craig Blair signing out. Craig, cheers, my friend. Speak to you soon. Phil saying Coleraine produced grain for Bushmills before it closed. That's correct. That's not gone back as many years as we think either. Whiskey Weekend Dram. Good evening. I am going quiet. I apologize. I'm trying to, as I say, read. And Hazelburn 10, dollar past 10. Hazelburn 10 is wonderful, but unfortunately here in the US at $110, it's a dear price to pay for it. Do you know, Tim, we just don't get it. We literally don't. It's one of those that shows up very, very rarely. Roy's saying, you're right with that, Hazelburn. Triple distilled, peat, apparently, then you taste the funk. It's class, absolutely class. Never, it's so long since I've had it. Such a beautiful whiskey. There was definitely something else that one. I'm going to scroll back down. Eric Waite's in, and he has added to the bottle fund. Thank you, Eric. Been on furlough since October the 1st, government shutdown. Oh, hope you're all right there. I hope I get back to work soon, and so do I. I'm running out of whiskey. Eric, I'm sure you're running out of whiskey. Eric, I just for your benefit, Eric, and I don't know how often he does this. Ali from Peru, the Peruvian Ali in Springbank, I'm sure most of us have come across at some point. We were there earlier in the year, and Ali popped out with Eric Waite's rather sturdy challenge coin and said, "You guys know Eric Waite?" And we all just looked at each other and went, "Yes, Ali, of course we know Eric Waite." So you are famous, Eric, in Springbank, but I'm sure you already knew that. Emery, have we discussed the difference between regions and protected localities? No, that's a subject for another time. I will not be going in there. that's a minefield there. Dollar past 10, a knock is a favourite of mine. Going to be butter for quite a while now. That has been violated by rebranding. It's one of those ones. A knock, I agree. It was at the 18. I still have a drop of it left there and a bottle tucked away, and I'm keeping it there out of my reach. It was beautiful. Graham Fraser, evening, Jim, and erstwhile Barflex. Graham, hello, my friend. I'm on a bit of a whiskey bar crawl in Edinburgh tonight, so we'll catch up on replay. Regionality is like Terroir. I imagine he means they're not Terror. Fascinating topic. Hope to catch up at Glasgow. And Graham, I have no doubt we will, my friend. I have no doubt. Hazelburn, you lovely, lovely whiskey, you. The reason why I wanted to do the Hazelburn, I'm not, as I say, I don't want to, it's still a school night. I don't want to be too silly. Water in the glass, rinse it out. I have the peated to go yet. I'm going to go Talisker 10. This is the rebranding of the Talisker 10. Weirdly, I actually do have the old branding Talisker 10 in the cabinet, unopened. And it was a gift to me many, many moons ago from one of the Highland battalion who didn't like peated whiskey. And he gave me that. He said somebody had gifted it to him. He didn't want it, so he gifted it to me. And it's still in my cabinet. It's the old branded Talisker 10-year-old. And it can stay there in its old branding. I'm not going to sell it. It's not what it's for. It's for drinking. It'll be drank at some point. But I remember this Talisker 10-year-old, pardon me, before Diageo seemed to take the ball and run with it regarding pricing. And the Talisker 10-year-old for a long time was just floating about at a relatively good price. So I remember picking up a bottle of it. I think I actually bought it for a tasting. Rick Johnson. Cheers, my friend. Rick has added to the bottle fund. Jim, in case you decide to bring the kilt over to Glasgow, here's a contribution to the Rick, have you been reading my emails? And I'll tell you why. Well, I'm actually going against that. I was going to bring the kilt to Glasgow, and that was the thing. I took a tight fit. I actually took a tight fit because it was one of those. So I've checked in and everything. I've checked in the flights. Yes, I could probably add a bag still if I wanted to. I was going to wear the kilt, but it was going to cost me £60 just to check an overweight bag, and it was literally just all I needed that overweight bag for was the kilt. And I thought to myself, well, does it really matter that much that I wear a kilt on the day of the Glasgow Whisky Festival? I personally think no, and I'm sure Hamish is in here. Hamish will be wearing his kilt, be it the blend or be it the non-blended one, be it the single kilt or whatever he's calling it. But I did, and it's just weird that you bring that up because I was making excuses in my head. And technically, I'm still making excuses in my head as to why I'm not. And I could wear the kilt. People have said this to me: just wear the kilt there. Then you don't need to pack it. Can you imagine? This is what I'm going to say. Can you imagine the alarms that would go off in a kilt in more ways than one? They are alarming in their own. But just the amount of metal that's on a kilt with buckles and badges and pins and stuff like that there, to wear it through security just seems logistically wrong. And as I said, I just took a tight fit regarding packing it. Anyway, that's just another add in there. Eric Waite studies. When I went through the Springbank Whisky School, I gave everyone a challenge coin and some souvenirs from NASA, my employer. There you are. Well, that was, I felt obliged, Eric, and I owe Lee J. Brown one of my challenge coins because whenever Ali was brandishing yours so much, I felt obliged to give him one of mine as well. So hopefully he's brandishing mine the same way as he is yours. The Ginger Genius was at a tasting at the Campbelltown Festival, where it was mentioned that recently Hazelburn 10 contained whiskey that was a lot older. I would imagine it probably does, just to try and hit that flavour profile, which to a certain extent doesn't make sense anyway, because we know that Springbank's products generally are batch variable. And I couldn't believe it until I reviewed, or didn't review, but certainly tried the 3 Springbank 10s over 3 different batches and how different they were. So it's Hazelburn 10, the fact that they would be putting older spirit in there. Yes, I suppose they're still trying to hit I wouldn't imagine they're trying to hit a flavor profile, but they must just be trying to more so hit a quality. It's all I can imagine. It's all I can imagine. But it's a good example of triple distilled spirit in Scotland. Once again, something I hear in the whiskey shop, not necessarily, well, almost on a daily basis. Triple distilled, and once again, I'll say this thing: all Irish whiskey triple distilled, all Scotch whiskey double distilled. And no, it's not. No, and I know it's very difficult. Inverurie said it earlier on that technically, I suppose we're here to educate and not to look down our noses at the beginners, at the newbies. It's just very difficult when you hear it every day, which we tend to do. Every now and again, I just roll my eyes and just go. It's the same as proofing. You've no idea how many people if you had this exactly the same bottle sitting side by side, and one of them said 40 ABV and the other one beside it said 80 proof, the amount of people will just go to 80 proof. It's just a number. It's the same as triple distilled versus double distilled. In my opinion, that people naturally think because it's one more distillation, it's smoother, and it's as I said earlier, and I will say it again, they obviously haven't tried Auchentoshan. The old Tasker 10 was my introduction to peanut whiskey, so it has a place. Do you know, for Nightwalker, there's an awful lot of people that still go back to Tasker 10 for their introduction. Getting back to regionality a little, and we will hopefully steer back to regionality because I seem to have steered off a little. But Talisker, to me, produce an incredibly unique whiskey in Scotland. I can't think of anybody else in Scotland who make a whiskey with that sort of salinity that they do without being heavily peated. It's more of a meaty thing, more of it's more savory rather than being smoky. In my opinion, I've never considered Talisker smoky. I've always just considered it salty and savory rather than heavily peated. And I think that's what is that gateway in for a lot of us, that we know there's something in there. I remember, I still very, very clearly remember drinking those original, the Diageo classic malts, and Talisker was the one that at the time was technically, it was the first peated one I drank at the time. And I remember loving it then, as to a certain extent I do now. Sure, Kitty, alarm go off for a kilt. I once saw a lady go on Halloween go through security as the fairy godmother with a hoop skirt. And the hoops were metal. Oh my God, that one. Yeah, Royce saying, you need an extra suitcase for that. And this is, so Red Mordecai, I'm going to tell you this little story. I'm going to throw this one in here, just on the subject of the kilt. I doubt whether any terrorist would be wearing a kilt. Earlier this year, March of this year, the King and Queen of England visited the whiskey shop in which I work. The owner of the whiskey shop wanted me to wear the kilt. This was he always sort of seen me in a kilt, and it was one of those things that, because I openly and happily promote the fact that I prefer Scotch whiskey over Irish whiskey, even though I work in an Irish whiskey shop, he bought me a kilt. I'm going to go out there and say it, and a good one. I mean, and he bought me a kilt. It was my tartan, our tartan, Ingram. We were seps of the Colquhoun clan, who still sit and seat in Luss and Loch Lomond, and so it's Colquhoun tartan is my kilt. So he wanted me to wear the kilt whenever the King and Queen visit. We did. I did. I wore my kilt. Obviously, there was an awful lot of security around this. This was the King and Queen of England. I had my skene dhu down my sock. I was the only one who was visibly armed when the King and Queen came, and I wasn't searched. So to say that they don't expect a terrorist in a kilt, there you go. They obviously don't expect terrorists to wear kilts. I would imagine the breeze might also discourage the wearing of a kilt. Honestly, Drew, kilts are absolutely roasting. It's quite the opposite. Will it wear a pat down when wearing the kilt could be interesting. It could. It's the pat up which would be more concerning. Decorative pins in the kilt, skene dhu knife and sock, etc., etc. Avian slits, and there you go. That's where I was with it. Barry Coleman, a new name to me. Welcome in. Sorry, Jim. I'll have to catch this in the replay. Great meeting you in Belfast a few weeks ago, Barry. Cheers, my friend. You're probably going to have to introduce yourself whenever you communicate. Apologies. If I could consolate you, people I meet in the supermarket or at work keep on asking me over and over, what is your favorite whiskey? And I had to change my answer. No longer names given. Greg, that's the thing. People ask me, they will walk into the shop. My colleague Ray was in here earlier on. He may still be watching. And the people just go, what's your favorite whiskey? Naturally, I suppose it's just one of those things that people want to know naturally. Do you drink whiskey is a question that I get asked regularly. And the thing about it is that it's easier just to fire a whiskey out there. In most cases, they're not buying anyway, so it doesn't matter what you tell them. That's certainly what I found. Whiskey Weekend Dram, do we have a quiz tonight? We do. I have, and that's another topic. AI, people know I use AI for my thumbnails, etc. Most of them, the newer ones from my reviews. At the weekend, I knew I had a fairly busy week. So this sort of dropped into that fairly busy week. And I thought to myself, right, I could do with coming up with a quiz. I could have reached out to Menno, and he would probably, because we know that Menno's a fixer. We know he can do this sort of thing. And he's very high. I certainly hold him in high regard for it. But I didn't want to annoy him. I didn't want to bother him because he did it for me in the summer. I just didn't want to be a bother to anybody. So I reached out to AI instead, and I said, create me a very difficult 10-question quiz on Scotch whisky regionality. And it wasn't pretty difficult. As a matter of fact, I read through it and just went, yeah, yeah. And I thought, well, if I know that, these people will definitely know it. So then I tried again. No, a much harder quiz. 4 times I tried this, and every time the questions that weren't easy, when I say weren't easy, the questions that were that little bit harder, I wasn't even convinced the answer was right in most cases. So I just decided that, nope, I'm going to have to sit down and write this quiz for myself. Red Mordecai saying, the last time I drank Talisker 10, I thought I had COVID. I couldn't taste anything. Yeah, it's been a while since I've had it, and it's, yeah. There's an official Jewish tartan. Red Mordecai saying, I'd love to have a kilt made from this. There's some beautiful tartans. There's an awful lot of Irish tartans now. Actually, the kilt that I wore the day that the King and Queen visited was actually, I was wearing the Irish national tartan because my kilt wasn't ready. We had panicked at the last minute to get it made and just wasn't ready in time. So I wore the Irish national tartan, which is green and black, and there's gold in it. Beautiful, beautiful tartan. King, Queen of the United Kingdom, sorry for being apologies. Mark Watt, my favorite kilt story was when Frank McCarty and I were in Japan wearing kilts, went for a pint and won second prize in the Halloween fancy dress contest. Brilliant. My colleague in here once again, who I work with, Ray, tells the story of that, about being in Rome, or certainly one of the larger Italian cities, and the guys standing around dressed as Roman, the full Roman armor, you know, and and these Scots basically there for the thing, they were there for the rugby, walking through the city dressed in their kilts, and all of the, I think it was predominantly Japanese tourists taking pictures of the Scots, and not one bit interested in these Roman Trojans. It wouldn't have been Trojans, would they? No. Somebody will pick me up on that. My favorite whiskey is easy. Yes. I always answer yes. Whiskey music. My favorite whiskey is the drams in my glass at the time. A lot of cases we say my favorite whiskey is my next one. Greg says something there. A very, very, I would suggest, I don't drink whiskey, I taste it. And this is what we talk about in tastings. You know, it's a I'm going to use a local term, skite in the bottom of the glass. It's a drop in the bottom of the glass in a lot of cases. We're not there to get drunk. We're there to enjoy and taste whiskey. Getting drunk sometimes can be a side effect of it, but it's better to, you know, get the enjoyment out of it. This is why in our whiskey tastings, we, you know, it's smaller pours. AI, alcohol, intelligence. I agree, Eric. Kyle Taylor, my wife accidentally stuck my large camping knife into the UN building whilst doing an interview. Found it after passing the security and abandoned it in the trash after borrowing my bag. It's scary sometimes what we bring through by accident. Very scary. Damned AI, sorry, but not a fan of those highly AI generated thumbnails, Jim. So dehumanizing, I prefer your previous ones. Yeah, well, we all have, this is the thing, I suppose we all have different, we try to sort of grow and evolve, Greg, and yeah, you can never please everybody. Greg Schwartz, there's a whiskey industry tartan called Angel Share, designed by a tartan artisan, and it's gorgeous. There you go. There's tartans for everything. Tartans for everything these days. Red Mordecai has been great. Whiskey novice should have more live streams. I have to go and get to bed. Good night, all. Rep, thank you, my friend. If I did live streams all the time, you would get bored very, very quickly, sir. Very, very quickly. Highland Hamish, I can see a splinter group evolving kilted drammers, with apologies for the thought of splinters and kilts. It's one of those, I probably didn't. Yeah, well, I did say it earlier on that my boss that bought me the kilt did so, I think, as you know, he felt like as if he was taking the hand out of me because I keep saying that I prefer Scotch whiskey over Irish whiskey. The honest truth is, I had worn kilts 2-3 times at weddings and stuff, hired kilts at weddings and stuff like that before, and never had an issue with it. I think they're stunning looking things. I think I'm not a true Scotsman in that my heritage, without going too far back, is my great grandfather. I've said it in here before. Was a Scot. Came over from Glasgow to. He worked on the Clyde. Came over to work on Titanic, of all things. Wasn't his fault. And he. It's funny because my father. We've never been able to find any pictures of this man. With no idea what he looked like, other than what my father used to tell us. His name was Jim. And he was a big fellow with a beard. Did I model myself on him? No, I think this is accidental, but there you go. At the Colosseum, I saw a Roman centurion, that was the word I was looking for earlier, Sugar Kitty, who was giving tours in full regalia. All of a sudden, there was a buzzing, and he pulled a Nokia phone from under his costume. I can well believe it. I can well believe it. Spring Bay Distillery. Welcome from Taz. I had to do a bit of Googling on you the other day. Anyone tasted this Aquavit Glasgow release yet? As always, tempted to pay the huge import cost to get. I'm sure there are plenty of people in here, Spring Bay Distillery, who will have tasted it. I didn't pull the trigger on this one. I will explain why at a later date. There's a good answer to you there, Greg. Unfortunately, policeman, have you been drinking? Me, no, officer. I've been tasting. I've actually made it to the bottom of the chat finally. Believe it or not. Whiskey music. I tried pouring smaller pours, found them, and I just usually pour more of them. I know that's the thing. I do the same. Desi Vleeland's in. Desi, how are you? Even Jim and all, rummaged through the cabinet, and Glenkinchie is apparently the only classic malt I've got. So dram poured. Do you know, as I said earlier on, Desi, that I still think that Glenkinchie's a tasty. And to me, actually, if you told me that Glenkinchie 12 was a Speyside and a classic sort of what we know as that traditional Speyside, then I would, I would agree wholeheartedly. I would find it very easy to believe, because it just has all of that honeysuckle sort of thing. Well, there, that's the Talisker 10. Here's the last one that I think, and it might not be the last pour I'll have the night. The quiz will be coming soon, but classic Lager 16, and I'm going to tell you that, and you'll probably, some of you will roll your eyes at this. That cork's out a little drier than I would like it to, but this is a Lager 16 that would have been bought at a time when Lager 16 was still its original price of about, well, say its original price, but its price that we all liked, we all preferred, of about £45 and not the sort of 75 around and above that it is now. I don't imagine the whiskey has changed in itself. It's just our attitude toward it because of the price hike. It's one of those things that I look at, honestly, for a 16-year-old whiskey, even at 75, yes, we see it on offer, even at 75, still not a bad price for a 16-year-old whiskey. Certainly one that with the flavour and quality of the lager, and I'm sure there'll be people who will argue with me here, but it's just, I think, because most of us knew it literally 2 years ago for like £45 a bottle, and said 2 years ago, could be 3 years ago, but I certainly preferred it when it was much cheaper. I mean, that's Gav's drams off. Gav, thank you, my friend. Always good to see you, Gavin. I mean, very easy to love you, man. So Roy has just got his Glasgow ball. Terroir, hi from Kosovo. Welcome. Welcome to Kosovo. So it feels a bit like European song contest. It's been a while. It's honestly, this Lager 16, I'm going to let that sit a while in the glass, but it's probably been too long in the bottle, in the cabinet. I really should just wipe that out. Henrik Schmidt, who can forget Blue Spot, Irishman, 17-year-old, red breast, cask strength. In regards to what, Henry, I mean, at the end of the day, I would agree that certainly in that, I'll take the red breast cask strength. It's the one red breast that I tell people, if you're going to buy one red breast and one red breast only, buy the 12-year-old cask strength and just forget about the rest. Mark's saying, used to drink so much Lager 16, not had a bottle in years. Honestly, Mark, this is sitting in my cabinet. Been a while. Been a while. I don't know whether it's the fact that the bottle's been sitting in the back of the cabinet for a while, or I'm certainly not getting, instantly I'm not getting all of that tropical fruit that I used to get. But it's the first sip I've had of it for a while. It's on top of other whiskies, and I do believe that our palate acclimates to those and just doesn't necessarily Old Pirate Bourbon, that's a new name to me. Welcome. I want to see what good evening, are you and Frank staying? Oh, right. No, something else. Yeah, Jimmy Legs sounds never as good as you remember it. You could very much be right there, Jimmy. There was certainly more tropical fruit going on. There's a very weird, almost, I'm getting a very weird, almost wafer biscuit note off this. Do you know the good news about it is I'll probably shuffle it to the front of the cabinet again and actually finish the bloody bottle rather than it just sitting in there not being drank. We all know that it's not good for it to just sit there forever. I'm amazed actually how much flavor is still in it. Has it went a bit funny? Has it went a bit funky? I don't know. Right. Let's go back to and round up the subject of regionality, because as per usual, when you get back into the chat, I feel like as if we sort of may have skipped over a lot of stuff, but I wanted to talk earlier on about the likes of Islay and stuff like that there. I mean, Islay established as a place, we still talk about the sort of, well, I certainly hear the term the Highlands and Islands as when I hear peated whiskey being mentioned in Scotland, and this is once again, this is outside of us. This is outside of you and I, who probably, well, spend our time buying, drinking, tasting, whiskey. That peated thing. Well, they're all at it now, and as was mentioned in what Roy had said earlier on, that because malt is so much easier to move around now, just to have peated whiskey wherever you are, it's, you know, you can just keep on. Anybody can make whatever they want now, simply. Will regionality carry on to play a part? I don't personally think so, but I also don't think it will go away, and I don't think it should. This is very much my summary on what we've been talking about and how I feel about it. I don't know whether I've actually, well, to a certain extent, I've said how I feel about it. Once again, a bit like what Roy said earlier on, I have a place for it, but to a certain extent, that is because I'm a creature of habit and I don't like change. And what I know is regionality. That's the way it is. What I don't know in Irish whiskey is regionality. So I don't want regionality. It's not because I simply think in Irish whiskey it wouldn't progress anything. I think in English whiskey, and I don't know, I feel a bit guilty that I don't know enough about English whiskey, and I don't know enough about English whiskey. What I do know is that I once again don't think it would progress English whiskey on if it was regionalized in any way and developed up, because certainly of the English whiskies I've had, I haven't found any difference from north to south, east to west. And the same, technically I could say the same in Ireland. There aren't a lot of the further south you get in Ireland, there are not a lot of them making peated whiskey yet. But that's, to a certain extent, I would suggest, more because nobody's going to drink it. Of the peated whiskies that we have, weirdly, we get an awful lot of people. I probably don't do an awful lot of good, because if people ask me for peated whiskey, where Irish whiskey is concerned, I tend to direct them away from peated Irish whiskey, for the simple fact that, as I keep repeating myself, we're not as good at it as the Scots yet. And I underline the word yet. You're really only going back about 25 years thereabouts, where Connemara was the sort of the traditional Irish peated whiskey. It's very thin on the palate whenever you get to know good, meaty, thick Scotch peated whiskies. What are dry, who are pretty much the best example yet of putting out heavily peated malt, are doing and somebody said it in the chat, I think it was Adrian, it might have been, maybe I'm wrong. I'm struggling with their dry peated malt. That's all I'd say. Whoever it was said the same thing. They're struggling with it. I'm struggling with it as well. I don't know what the hell's going on in it, but it just doesn't work for me. Does that mean that the Scots make peated malt solely? No. Anybody that can make it can, why not? If you can make it, try. They're doing it in America. They're doing it all over. Jeremy Legg says it's hard to beat Leipzig. It is. It's hard to beat. I mean, Leipzig was a prime example of one that, to me, I always talked about it as a peat sleeper in the earlier days anyway, and it seemed to hide the fact that it was so smoky, but it just kept coming. This smokiness just kept coming. This is just Leipzig 10-year-old. But still, I'll take an Ardbeg, Lefroy, Lagavulin, Kilchoman, Bamore. I'll take any of them any day of the week over an Irish peated malt at the minute. But we'll get there. We will get there in Ireland. It's just a different style of whiskey, basically, to add in there. So what I tend to do is direct people whenever they come looking for peated malts, and I'm actually going completely the opposite direction and say pot still. If it's Irish whiskey you want, just buy pot still. If you like Lagavulin, Lefroy, Ardbeg, just buy Lagavulin, Lefroy, Ardbeg. Don't try and come to Ireland and find something that's going to be a good alternative to that. Just put pot still, because the Scots don't technically, in a way, it's journey of one down, but I mean, try to avoid and stick to what the Irish are good at, pot still, and once again, regionality doesn't play into that because they're making pot still all over Ireland. And while we are in a position that most of the new distilleries are still reaching out to one distillery, that being Great Northern Distillery, and all sourcing their spirit from that place, well, they're just making the spirit for everybody then, technically, in a lot of cases. Jimmy's asking, do you think triple distillation accentuates peat and smoke or diminishes it? Well, the thing about it is, if we're talking in Ireland, Jimmy, most of the peated producers are double distilling anyway. It's not so. Connemara, for example, is Dundalk. My head's gone at this time of night. John Teeling's distillery, whenever he opened it in 1987, Cooley Distillery, only double distill. So Connemara comes out of Cooley Distillery. Kilbeggan, it's Kilbeggan's address on Connemara Malt. They only they're laying claim to it. They're still under Beam Suntory as it is now. Suntory. Double distilled, or dry, double distilled, as far as I believe. I have a bottle of it behind me here, but I think it's double distilled. I can't think of too many triple distilled peated malts. I genuinely don't know what difference it would make, or if any. Let me see it. I think I missed something there. Or what? I certainly believe it. As Mark Watts said 15 years ago, couldn't have given Lechick away, and that's the thing. It's obviously they're progressing. It shows you how much they're all progressing. If only I bought casts back then, can't afford casts these days. That lager sort of come back to life a wee bit. I'm not convinced that the being in the back of the cabinet has done it any good over that length of time. Probably not a bad idea if I actually just finish it off. Speaking of finishing off, I would definitely see how we could live without regionality. Inverurie, just before I say that, sorry I can't stick around for the quiz. You're quite all right. Have a great weekend, folks. And you, appreciate it. Yeah, I can see how, but I personally, I'm quite happy that I believe that regionality will just hang around as a sort of. I don't think regionality will be anything other than just something there to appease the older. It's certainly not necessarily a tool anymore. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't necessarily serve a purpose when any distillery in any of the regions can make any style of whiskey they wish. But I still like it, and I will still use it if it has got one purpose alone, and if it's only to help me to do these Scotch whiskey tastings and bring Scotch whiskey to Ireland and make a point out of what whiskey can be and what Scotch whiskey is. That's what led this in the first place. Well, then I'm just going to carry on and say that, look, regionality has got its place in my heart. There. Right, let's have a quiz. Come on ahead. Vpub Stand-in quiz, October 2025. I don't know whether this is difficult or not. It's the easiest way to put it. I'll try this screen here. I genuinely don't know whether it's difficult or not. Some of it might be, some of it might not. Rick Johnson said no asshats. I believe there could be a couple in it that would be considered asshats. It's always very difficult to know. All quizzes, whiskey quizzes, in my opinion, at this time of night are difficult. So Here goes. Question 1. Here's an easy one to start. Which Singleton distillery was never one of the Dufton Seven? So Rome was built, here's the old saying, I'm sure most of you have heard it. Rome was built on 7 hills, Dufton built on 7 stills. So there's an easy one to start off with. Which Singleton distillery? The Singleton of Dufton distillery was never one of the Dufton Seven. So one of the 7 distilleries, and they have come and went over the years. Is it A, Glendullan, B, Dufton, or C, Glenord? Now, they have come and went over the years. And what I mean is, some of the original 7 were mothballed, but they were padded out that it basically then came back to being 7 distilleries in Dufton, etc., etc. So it's, I'm going to say it's a relatively easy one to start off with. Which Singleton distillery was never one of the Dufton 7? Is it A, Glendullan, B, Dufton, or C, Glenord? I'm going to give you a moment. Just scrolling up, there was something said by Eric Waite studies. Maybe it's my wine studying background, studying maps to orient my studying, but my brain seems to bet Tyfax that a winery distillery when I think regionally. I think this is, I once again, I agree with you, Eric, that it's just one of those things. It's easier whenever it's split up to a certain extent. Irish whiskey, though, I don't see it. I certainly couldn't see it happen. C. I'm seeing an awful lot of C's. So I'm going to say C is correct. Glenord, not only not one of the Duftons, or not one of the Dufton 7, a Highland distillery. So quite a bit away from, quite a bit outside Speyside. So not one of the Dufton 7. 1 for 1 for an awful lot of people there. That's good. Question 2. Which of these was never a Campbelltown distillery? Simple, once again. A, Dallintober, B, Lochvara, or C, Glenramscal. So which of these was never a Campbelltown distillery? Is it A, Dallintober, B, Lochvara, or C, Glenramscal? As I said, I feel it's always very difficult to know what's easy and what's difficult in these terms, because when you're writing the quiz yourself, you generally feel like as if it's easy. Because, well, I would know it's easy. I wrote the bloody questions. But in a lot of cases, it's not just as easy as you think. I'm going to go back to the Glencairn for just a little drop in the bottom of the glass. Because, weirdly, for what's a relatively simple whiskey, bottled at 43%, that Glencairn, apart from the hazel burn, I would suggest was easily the one of the night. So, which of these was never a Campbelltown distillery? Was it A, Dallintober, B, Lochvara, or C, Glenramscal? The answer is, and I think from what I could tell, most people were hitting B, which is the correct answer, Lochvara. I talked about AI earlier on. That's what AI gave me whenever I said, name a Campbelltown distillery that doesn't exist. and it fired up a few. And Lochvara, to me, actually sounded quite believable. So I put it in there. Question 3. Stromness Distillery, 1817 to 1928, was once owned by which Belfast whiskey producers? Was it A, Royal Irish, that was Dumbles, as we pretty much know them, B, Kirker Greer, or C, J.J. McConnell, J&J McConnell. Stromness Distillery, once also, sometimes in case there's anybody being anal about it. Manahoy was its other name. Stromness Distillery, 1817 to 1920. It was once owned by which Belfast whiskey producers? Was it Royal Irish? Was it Kirker Greer? Or was it C, J and J McConnell? So, Greg's saying it's getting tough. David Owen, sorry, Jen, nodded off, missed the start of the quiz. That's quite all right, David. So did I. So, of course, like a few of the questions that I'm going to throw out tonight, you need to know where Stromness Distillery was to a certain extent. Well, I suppose maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. I sort of threw it in there thinking, well, I suppose it would make sense that you would need to know where Stromness was. But I suppose to a certain extent you don't. But it's one that it's weird. It's one that I will suggest that having worked in the whiskey shop for a while now, there's certain things that you pick up and they stick in there, and it's just this weird. It's one that's stuck with me. So there's a lot of answers coming out. There's a bit of, I would suggest, firing round, but when I hear people and see people saying going with the flow, C, as David Owen is doing, the correct answer is C, J&J McConnell. Stromness, as Sugar Kitty very clearly pointed out, Orkney, the third distillery on Orkney, although it didn't exist at the same time as the other two. They came, they went, etc., etc. Quite a few 3 for 3s. That's good to see. I'm glad to see that. I mean, I'm not out to try and cheat you of anything. So here we go. Question 4. Of the Islay distilleries listed, which two opened originally in the same year? So A, Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain, B, Bunnahabhain and Colilla, or C, Bruichladdich and Ardbeg. Which two of the Islay distilleries opened in the same year? And out of the options I've given you, there are only one. There's only one right answer. I know that sounds maybe a bit stupid, but I mean, it's one of those things that I went through a lot of these things, believe me. This is I think the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues I have with writing a quiz is making sure and fact checking that the wrong answers are not also right. However, as per usual, a very knowledgeable group, and there's a few people that have actually come in there with the right answers, and not only the right answers, but the actual year. And it was, of course, Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain, 1881. A couple of people have pointed that out. So that's, and I mean, I weirdly, I probably have it written down here in front of me somewhere, the years that they all, because there were another two of them that opened in the same year, and I can't remember which two it was off the top of my head right now, but somebody I'm sure will tell me. A lot of 4 for 4s. Good on you people. Question 5. The bulk of Scotland's grain distilleries are in the lowlands, as Greg pointed out earlier on. But which is the oldest? Is it A, Strathclyde, B, North British, or C, Cameron Bridge? The bulk of Scotland's grain distilleries are in the lowlands region, but which is the oldest? Is it A, Strathclyde, B, North British, or C, Cameron Bridge? David Owen is 2 for 4, but in fairness, he was sleeping through the first two questions. Glasgow Whisky Festival, not too far away. I do hope to see a lot of you there. It's become the topic of conversation in the Highland Battalion chat. So an awful lot of us going across this year again. Most of these questions, by the way, come from the Malt Whiskey Yearbook. I just noticed Rick Johnson need more time to go through the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, and that's where most of them come. And even not that I doubt what he's saying, but I do also fact check everything again, because it's just one of those things that we don't want to be, because you lot are so knowledgeable. It's one of those things that we don't want to be caught out with this quiz. So I think there's enough answers in there now. A bit sort of more up and down. Pardon me, a few guesses. I would say a few people going with the crowd, but the answer is, pardon me, C, Cameron Bridge. Roy just slipping in there with a C at the last second. The bulk of Scotland's grain distilleries are in the Lowlands region, but which is the oldest? Is C, Cameron Bridge. And by quite some margin, it was once again, it was closer to the early 1800s. Cameron Bridge. I don't have the date written down in front of me. I forgot to do that. But I remember just at the time, it was by quite some margin. We're starting now. There's a few pass marks. We do have a few, and it's great to see. Some pass marks already, some just off the mark at the moment, but plenty of time to pull it back yet. Question, I cannot remember for the life of me what these questions are. Some of them might just be crazy. Question 6, in which region is this? I did say it might be a bit crazy. In which region is this? Now, at this point, you do need to know where that is. And I dare say somebody will probably shout out where it's at. But if you know where that's at, then you'll know what region it's in. So I went through that Glenkinchie a wee bit quick that last time, so I put another little drop in the bottom. Eric Waite's saying dates are easiest to remember. We're in the distillery pits then on the body. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, agreed. It's always easier to remember whenever the dates are on there. I've tucked that Glenkinchie away at the back of the cabinet, and I probably shouldn't. Sugar Kitty saying there's a technically an ass hat because yeah, exactly. That was, and it was one that I thought I mean, even to guess that, I always struggled with just guessing the distillery. It always amazed me how much you people knew whenever, Graham Fraser, mind blowing. I mean, just knowing what a distillery was just from small parts of it, and it's although I'm starting to wonder, is Graham Fraser in here under a different name, because he did say earlier on that he wasn't able to play a part tonight, but. Yes, a few people have already spotted that it was indeed Inchderry, and it is, of course, then in the Lowlands. I would imagine there's quite a few people hitting 6 out of 6 by now. As I said at the start, I don't know whether this is difficult or not. It would have been difficult to me had I not known that was Inchderry Distillery. Yes, I mean, even it is fresh looking, it is new, but Lord knows how many distilleries in the Lowlands, as we said earlier on, in the Kingdom of Fife alone, are new and fresh looking. So well done to you, well done to Desi Leland, who pointed that out and picked it out as an Inchderry. So we have an awful lot of 6 out of 6. It's good stuff. You're going well. I could throw a little spanner in the works. You don't know. Question 7: which peated whiskey's name translates to safe haven? Is it A, Micheltor, B, Kuboken, or C, Lechik. And I know I didn't put the accents on the letters in either Mikultor or Kuboken, and I apologize for that. It was just, as I said, I did have a bit of work to do this week. So we could have a lot of 10 out of 10s here. And I'm not saying that you're right here necessarily, but you're doing well. I mean, that inch there, and he won a low one through me, and to know the distillery is one thing, then you know, Sugar Kitty said it, then you got to know what region it's in as well. I've said it repeatedly here, very educated people. Very educated people. Which peated whiskey's name translates to safe haven? Is it A, Mikultor, B, Kuboken, or C, Lechik? I think there's enough people have answered, and I think most of those people have answered correctly with C. And I also believe that Eric Waite said something about Kuboken has something to do with the dog. Yeah, you're right. I can't remember what it is. Jimmy Legg has added into the ball fund. Thank you, Jimmy. Angie is calling me, so I'm off. Thanks, Jim, for taking over. You did great. Thank you, Jimmy. Of course, the bar was pretty low. Jimmy. Say hello to Angie for me. Hellhound. There you go, Sugar Kitty. Thank you. So, question 8. I honestly, I don't know what's coming next because I can't remember. On which of the Shetland Isles is the Saxiford distillery? Is it A, Unst, B, Hildesay, or C, Bressay? On which of the Shetland Isles is the Saxiford distillery? Is it A, Unst, B, Hildesay, or C, Bressay? And I'm not even sure if I've got my pronunciation right. I could be mispronouncing my, or as they, True Ronnie said, mispronunciating my words. Greg's Whiskey Guide said, never heard of that one. Greg, totally honest with you, neither had I. Somebody asked the question earlier on, is there a link? And I know generally in a lot of cases we say, you know, we'll know, well, you have to decide whether there's a link or not to a certain extent. I was sort of trying to keep it about regions technically as much as I could, you know, and try and get every region involved. Mark saying his mom's from Shetland. Obviously, the Shetlands cover a huge region. I absolutely love the accent from the Shetlands. We had it. It's just so sing-songy. I had guys in from what is it called? My Farming Life. There's a show here in the UK called My Farming Life, and there's generally a family focused on from the Shetlands, and their accent just, I absolutely love it. So I was looking at Roy's answers, and he is being sharp now. There's the C earlier on, and I was trying to figure out what the hell he's putting out now. I imagine that's an apple, so I take it A is for apple. So an awful lot of A's coming up there again, and of course is the right answer. Unst is the Saxiford's actually an airfield, I believe. So Greg's saying, you know, never, you know, didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it either, but I think Saxiford's actually an RAF airfield, and the distillery is named after it. And they tend to, at the minute, They are a whiskey distillery. They do have whiskey for sale. They do have whiskey on the market, but they're more, I think, focusing on the likes of gin. And so they're like a lot of the new guys. A lot of good answers coming in tonight. So let's just see where this goes, because I'm slightly concerned myself. If you traveled in a straight line from Ardnamurchan, the most furthest west distillery, to Glengarry, most furthest east distillery, which active underlying distillery would you directly intersect? Is it A, Breval, B, Ben Nevis, or C, Speyside? So I don't know whether this is it's a bit of an asshat question, I suppose, to a certain extent. If you traveled in a straight line, if you drew a straight line, and Lord knows this is the question I think I spent the longest over, in a straight line from Ardnamurchan to Glengarry, which active distillery would you directly intersect? A, Breval, B, Ben Nevis, or C, Speyside? And I underline the word active because there are probably inactive mothballed distilleries. Well, there are inactive mothballed distilleries that you would also perhaps pass through or close to. But I checked and checked and checked and checked and better checked with a ruler on a map, and there was one distillery that you would actually directly intersect. Question for a whiskey loving bird. Well put. This one actually seems to be throwing a bit of a spanner in the works, I would suggest. At least it's good to see people bouncing around a little more with their answers in this one. I suppose unless you're sitting with a map and a ruler in front of you, like some sort of Boy Scout. A Whiskey Weekend Drama Sim, but Speyside is correct. So now we are talking about the Speyside distillery. So as an active distillery. It's actually nice to see Desi Vleeland with a question mark. Obviously being not so sure for once. Quite a few answers in. I would suggest that most of you have given an answer who are left in the chat taking part. So I will go through the question one more time. If you travel in a straight line from Ardnamurchan to Glengarry, which active distillery would you directly intersect? Is it A, Breval, B, Ben Nevis, or C, Speyside? It is Ben Nevis. I did notice that Frank said B is too far north. It isn't. On a map, if you directly draw a line between those two distilleries, you directly intersect Ardnamurchan. And that's the way I'm talking. If you traveled in a straight line from Ardnamurchan to Glengarry, pardon me, the one distillery you would intersect would be Ben Nevis. I hope I haven't upset you too much with that one. How are we doing score-wise? Have I finally managed? Oh, no, still a few 9 out of 9s in there. Still a question for a drone. Desi's got 10 out of 10. I don't know how the hell she's managed that. But Frank's saying it's too far north. Well, certainly the map, Frank, that I did it on, it was the one that it intersected, was the only one, was Ben Nevis. Sugar Kitty says right in the middle. Anyway, I'm sure I probably upset a few people with that one. Anyway, and Mark was saying there are no straight lines from Ardnamurchan, obviously, but on a map, we're talking on a map, straight line. Now this one actually, technically, I suppose, should be fairly simple for you. Reading it could be a bit different. Adding together the current capacity. Now the current capacity of the 8 Islay distilleries which were active in 2009. Why 2009? Because that's when the SWA officiated the regions of Scotch whisky. Which single malt Scotch whisky distillery's current capacity comes closest? So adding together, trust me, I was struggling for a 10th question. This is why it's a bit convoluted. Adding together the current capacity of the 8 Islay distilleries which were active in 2009. So you need to know which 8 Islay distilleries were active in 2009, which isn't that difficult. Which single malt Scotch whisky distillery's current capacity comes closest? Is it A, Glenfiddich, B, Macallan, or C, Glenlivet? So adding together the current capacity of the 8 Islay distilleries which were active in 2009, which single malt Scotch whisky distillery's current capacity comes closest? A, Glenfiddich, B, Macallan, or C, Glenlivet? Sugar Kitty says do you know, Sugar Kitty, I think you could be right. I think I had to throw something in that was a bit ass-hatty. And, you know, it's a while since I've watched one of these quizzes, because I'm usually the first guy to pull a parachute as soon as the word quiz gets mentioned. So I quite happily throw in questions like this just to be the awkward one, just to be the awkward one. Adding together the current capacity of the 8 Islay distilleries which were active in 2009, which single malt Scotch whisky distillery's current capacity comes closest? And I have them written down in front of me because I knew that I would struggle a little with this myself to get it right, and just to make sure to keep it right with you, because we need to be close, we need to be right, and we need to use the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, which I did, and I fact checked it in the background. So Greg says he needs a pill just to understand the question in the first place. That's what I love. I love trying to throw a bit of confusion into the whole mix. Adding together the current capacity of the 8 Islay distilleries which were active in 2009, which single malt Scotch whisky distillery's current capacity comes closest? Now, we've just seen something, roughly 21 million versus 15 million. Here's what I'm going to tell you. So the 8 distilleries which were active in 2009, active: Bowmore, Ardbeg, Lefroy, Lagavulin, Colilla, Brookladdy, Bunnahabhain, and Kilhoman. Added together, their current capacity is 24 million litres. Anybody want to change their answer? Too late now. I see it happening. In 2009, there were 8 active distilleries on Islay with a current total capacity for 24 million litres per annum. This is their current capacity of those 8. Glenlivet has a current capacity of 21.5 million litres. Macallan, 16 million litres. Glenfiddich, 21 million litres. So it's that 500,000 litres that Glenlivet have over Glenfiddich, which makes the right answer there, Glenlivet. A way to wake up the neighbours. Oh, some of them so close. Sugar Kitty, 10 out of 10. Well done, Sugar Kitty. I'm sure there had to have been more. There had to have been. We'll hang back for a moment on this because I'm sure there had to have been more. Graham Young, 8 out of 10. Here, lucky to have had that, really, to be honest with you. Jerry Miller, 9 out of 10. Never even answered 10. Clueless. It's weird, you know. It's funny, and I'm going to leave it up there for a minute. And it was, I know it seems a bit convoluted and a bit. Here, I'm not the first to have thrown out a bloody question like that, this sort of thing. So, did I feel guilty about it? No, not one bit. Peter, both Glenlivet and Glenfiddich have a capacity for 21, according to not the Malt Whiskey Yearbook that I have. So ANC are correct. The malt whiskey yearbook that I have, which is last year's, was Glenlivet 21.5 Glenfiddich, and I did fact check that, Frank, on a few places online. Could only find 21, not 21.5, but yeah, I'm gonna have to. I mean, to a certain extent, we're not going to fall out over this. Please don't fall out with me over this. But certainly, there you are. Pete Head just grabbed the 2026 edition. I probably should have, well, maybe I should have added that in then, the 2025 edition. Damn it. Obviously, Glenlivet have lost 500,000 litres in the last year. And I should have added that in. Well, I suppose technically that is the 2026 edition. We're in 2025. So, you know, it's this year's edition. Roy says we might fall out of this. Please don't. It's, as I said, it's all in a bit of fun. It's all in the fun, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm actually so glad that 55 of you stayed in and hung around for it. Couple of 10 out of 10s. That's a result. That's good for you, Paul Quigley. Apologies. Some good guesses about it, but well done. Well deserved. Frank, no worries. Fun quiz. Thanks for providing the quiz. You're very welcome, Frank. As I said, it's so damn difficult. And I found myself thinking, well, you know, this is a quiz. You know, I've come up with this quiz, so it's probably. And then you go, well, hold on. I haven't watched every one of the quizzes that's been done on a weekly basis. So how many questions have come up before? You never know. Adrian Slosha, cheers for a very enjoyable night. But pardon me, thank you, Adrian. It's very much appreciated. Nice quiz. Thanks, you all. Kyle Taylor. I got 46% ABV on the quiz. Cheers, Eric. Once again, I find myself getting to the end of these live streams and thinking, did we achieve anything? That's not what it's about, I don't think. It's not about achieving anything. It's about giving our opinion. It's about enjoying ourselves. Roy, far too generous, buddy. There was no need. Thanks, pal. Wait to see who gets in Glasgow. Cheers, buddy. Glass is empty. Do you know what I did do earlier on? Oh, here's what I'm going to do. David Owens off the bed. Cheers, David. Thank you. I'm going to pour myself a wee bit of the favourite of the night. The Hazelburn 10-year-old, which I have very little of and probably not get any more for a while again. That can stay in the glass. And that's to you, Roy, and that's to everybody that joined in the night. Appreciate you all, I really do. Willie Doler, see you in Glasgow. I look forward to it, Roy. Or Willie. I like every year, Glasgow Whisky Festival is just a couple of weeks away. Like every year, we look forward to it. Like every year, I promise I'm not going to make a mess out of myself. Last year I did a bit, and this year I very much intend not to do that again. I very much don't. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not going to let it ruin my weekend. I've just learned how to be better behaved since last year. And it's not the festival. It's not Roy's tasting the following day. It's the bit between that where one makes a mess out of oneself. Thank you all for joining me tonight. As I say, did we solve anything? It's not what it's about. It's certainly not what I am here to do. I'm never really thinking about solving anything. As I said a few times earlier on, regionality in Scotch whisky isn't going to change my opinion, or whether it's really used anymore or not. That doesn't matter. It won't change my opinion on it. I will still use regionality. I'm trying my best to, and I almost said the word educate again, not educate, to introduce Scotch whisky to Ireland and reconfigure minds is the only way I could describe it. And put away all those misconceptions and preconceptions I love Irish whiskey. I don't think regionality would work in Irish whiskey. It's a personal opinion. Scotch whiskey is just a thing different. Technically, they're a different thing to a certain extent in a different league at the moment. I'll leave that one there. Thank you hugely for joining me tonight. I honestly, I can't do this without you. You know, this is nothing without you being here. So you were in, and that was very much appreciated. I think this is probably one of the best live streams I've ever had. I was buzzing for this because whiskey regionality, especially in Scotland, seems to be a hot topic at the moment for some reason. No real reason for it to be so. It's been around for a long time, but it certainly felt like a hot topic to me. And the amount of people that were in tonight, I think, you know, and talking about it would suggest that there's a bit of agreement there. Thank you all. Thank you all. I'm going to go because otherwise I will just talk and talk and talk. Please, please look after yourselves. I can't wait to see some of you in Glasgow in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, take care, my friends. Look after yourselves. And as always, here's to your good health. Cheers.